Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. I'm always grateful. I hope the week has gone well. Certainly whizzes by, and on that point of whizzing by, do have a look at this little video we did of a road trip from Thaiga to Westlands with Dr. Christian Turner, who's the British High Commissioner and a very good sport, in a Jaguar. It gives you a little bit of an insight into parts of Nairobi you might not know about. Macro thoughts: the median forecast for October non-farm payrolls in a Reuters poll of economists is an increase of 180,000, above slightly sluggish job growth of 142,000 in September. Data is due at 13:30 GMT, and obviously it's pretty key. I like this photograph of Nairobi that I found via Kenya Pics. Let me put that up. And then I went back to Pablo Neruda for my home thoughts. I want to do with you what spring does with the cherry trees. I like this photograph that was tweeted from the space station. For an instant before sunrise, the space station glows orange. Good morning from the space station. Pablo Neruda: someday, somewhere, anywhere, unfailingly, you'll find yourself, and that, and only that, can be the happiest or the bitterest hour of your life. And one by one, the nights between our separated cities are joined to the night that unites us. Political reflections: Tanzania's President-elect John Magufuli is escorted after inspecting a Tanzanian military guard of honor during his inauguration ceremony at the Uhuru Stadium in Dar es Salaam. And then I like this photograph of Hishamuddin and the US Secretary of Defense Ash Carter on board the USS Theodore Roosevelt. That was yesterday. They arrived via an Osprey MV-22, which you will recall was flying outside my window when President Obama came to visit. I like this comment in an article on Asia Times. After the lukewarm results of Xi Jinping's visit to the US in August, Beijing has been on a tour de force to change the outlook of its diplomacy. In that respect, Xi Jinping and David Cameron having a pub stop. Chinese President Xi Jinping and his wife Peng Liyuan are welcomed upon their arrival in Hanoi, Vietnam, competing claims in the South China Sea. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang meets his Japanese counterpart Shinzo Abe in Seoul. Of course, that is one of the trickier relationships in that part of the world. Francois Hollande at the Temple of Heaven in Beijing, China. So you can see in those photographs what a tour de force it has been since that visit to the United States. France, we've learned, is deploying its Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier to Syria and off Iraq to fight the Islamic State. And I concluded by saying traffic control around Syria is going to be pretty important. BBC Africa tweeted: Elton John, HIV/AIDS is spreading in Africa because people are afraid to say they are gay. And I was kind of interested to know what percentage of Africans would agree with that statement. Putin thinks he's Vladimir the Great, Condoleezza Rice has said. Former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice knew Vladimir Putin up close. One thing he liked to remind her during her time in the Bush administration was how Russia had only been great when it has been led by great men like Alexander II and Peter the Great. Hearing him eulogize former Tsars, there was a little voice in her head that wanted to suggest, and Vladimir the Great? Rice told a group of investors and bankers at an annual forum hosted by Fitch Ratings in New York on Wednesday. As a diplomat, she never did out of politeness, but that is how he thinks. Her musings on Putin's motivations seek to put Russia's growing assertiveness on the world stage, from the annexation of Crimea to the bombing campaign in Syria, as part of a grander scheme to restore Russian influence to its heyday. International sanctions and its first recession since 2009 have done little to blunt Putin's standing among Russians. He has decided he will find a way to avenge what he considers the greatest tragedy of the 20th century, which is the collapse of the Soviet Union. His game plan for Syria, Russia's first military foray outside the former Soviet Union since its occupation of Afghanistan in 1979, is not much of a mystery, Rice said. He doesn't want disorder, and so he believes stabilizing Assad will stabilize Russian influence. But let's not assume that he has the same definition of order that we do either, she said. Partition of Syria, control a third of it, call that Syria, why not? So our idea of stability and his are not the same. Casting her net wider, Rice noted there is almost no government that isn't suffering from a governance crisis, from Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff, risk of impeachment less than a year after getting re-elected, to Chancellor Angela Merkel, whose political future is at stake. Rice said when the US backs away from its role as enforcer of international order, more assertive Russia and China step in. Great powers can't get tired because the international order is not self-governing. Listen to this, let me let you in on a little secret. There is no such thing as an international community. There are self-maximizing, self-interested states that will push their interests as far as possible. She's right. You will recall I wrote my piece about the very point she's making on the 5th of October. I said Putin is a geopolitical grandmaster. Indeed he is. The wreckage of the A321 Russian airliner in Wadi al-Zolamat, a mountainous area of Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, is captured in this photograph by Getty Images. Barack Obama says there is a possibility that the Russian jet crash was the result of a bomb. I think there's a possibility that there was a bomb on board, and we're taking that very seriously, he said. 25th of August last year, I spoke about how planes had been falling out of the skies like flies. And I said then, we're not witnessing the flow of information. I was quoting Don DeLillo, as much as pure spectacle or information made sacred, ritually unreadable. The small monitors of the office, home and car become a kind of idolatry here, where crowds might gather in astonishment. We got pizza and wings. This is apparently a conversation held between the US and Chinese warships in the South China Sea. And then anti-war was saying that in 2002, Army General Tommy Franks, the chief of US Central Command, announced the Taliban is gone. Currency markets, the euro is at 108.75, touched 108.34. Yesterday, which was the lowest level since late July on Thursday. Dollar index above 98.04, close to a 3-month high of 98.135. Japanese yen 121.88, the Swissy 0.9962. The pound 151.74 fell 1.2% on Thursday, biggest drop since late August. That was because the Bank of England's governor dismissed the view that it would raise interest rates shortly after the Fed. The Aussie is at 0.7160, India rupee 65.805, South Korean won 1142.40, Rial 3.7812, Egyptian pound 802.86, and the Rand 13.95.38. Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart, and agree with this comment by Shinichiro, who said Fed policymakers appear to be trying to keep the possibility of a December rate hike alive since their last policy meeting. And my point with that is, very thin markets in December. You go for a rate hike then. It's going to amplify a lot of the effects. US 2-year Treasury touched a 4.5-year high of 108.74 last. I'll put up a 3-month chart, very bearish since Draghi started hitting the wires. And then the rise of the digital elite. Facebook surpasses General Electric in market value. Commodity markets, very interesting piece on Bloomberg. El Nino hits dinner table as food costs soar most in 3 years. An index of 73 food prices increased 3.9% in October to 162 points, the biggest jump since July 2012. What's happening in the Asia region is mainly related to the El Nino event. It's been dry in Southeast Asia. Australia is under pressure from drought now too. All is linked to El Nino. The increase in prices is a reversal of the trend from earlier this year. The gauge remains below July's level. Vegetable oil prices jumped 6.2%, the most since 2010. Dairy costs rose 9.4%, the biggest gain in 2 years. The Economist has an interesting article as well, planning for El Nino disaster, talking about Ethiopia in particular, where 8 million Ethiopians are now going hungry. Gold is at 1109.07. I'm glad we swapped it out when we did. Crude oil, $45.99. Don't see it running way to the upside. Al Jazeera asking, is Venezuela's economy on the road to hyperinflation? Most certainly is. The country's central bank continues to print money in the face of spiraling prices and a shortage of basic goods. On the 10th of August 2015, I said the end is nigh for crude oil and oil producers from Caracas to Luanda, from Riyadh to Abuja. I like this photograph that was tweeted. Venezuela, and the English translation is saying that they're building the most houses of any country in the world. Let me show you a photograph of President Kagame congratulating the new president of Tanzania, President Magufuli, at an inauguration ceremony in Dar es Salaam. African Union repeats its Burundi warning, saying the country's crisis poses devastating risk for the region. If the crisis is not solved, it would create conditions for more instability with devastating consequences for Burundi and the whole region. I wrote about this on the 4th of May, and I called it Eyes on Burundi. Spillover risks from debacle remain. Global risks insights. As oil prices drop, repression in Angola is on the rise. There is currently a larger trend in sub-Saharan Africa of protest and revolts against long-time incumbents. Angola is experiencing its own version of this trend, where until recently the ruling elite, the Futunga, named after the area in Luanda where the president resides, was awash with enough oil revenues to keep the peace. The sharp drop in oil prices earlier this year means that the Futunga are no longer able to dispense patronage and quell protests as easily. Taken together with widespread public dissatisfaction, Dos Santos and his ruling class are starting to feel the pressure of well-organized and persistent public protests. Investors must keep this history in mind in addition to developments in the commodities sector as tensions between protesters and Futunga escalate. Civil unrest in one of Africa's largest oil-producing countries and one with a history of civil war is sure to be far more high stakes and combustible than in any other African countries experiencing protests. Interesting piece in The Economist, industrialization in Africa more a marathon than a sprint. A comparison of Africa and Asia is striking. In Africa, manufacturing provides just 6% of all jobs, a figure that barely changed over more than 3 decades to 2008. In Asia, the figure grew from 11% to 16% over the same period. Africa's final snag is its geography. East Asia's string of successes happened under the flying geese model of development, where a lead country creates a slipstream for others to follow. MTN fine in context, this is Bloomberg, 5.2 billion is no joke at all. The South African all share fell just under 1%, but it's still up 8.64% this year. Dollar rand 13.93. I think we're going to see fresh lows Airlines to return British holidaymakers from Egypt without luggage. Egyptian pound 802.92. Egyptian stock market up strongly yesterday, up 1.23%. Remains down 15.51% year to date. Nigeria all shares down 16.23% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange down 12.26% year to date. Zimbabwe's revenue authority has intensified its crackdown on companies in order to raise revenue from a beleaguered treasury. But look at this, in its manufacturing sector survey for 2015, CZI said over 65% of installed production capacity in the manufacturing sector was lying idle. This is happening at a time when the education system is pouring thousands of graduates onto the job market. Their expectation is to get a decent job. Which job is not being forthcoming? Cameroon is considering issuing a dollar-denominated bond in what would be its first foray into the international sovereign bond market. Coming to Kenya, the weighted average rate for 182 days Treasury bills is 16.492%, and for the 364-day bill, it's 17.13%. On the 7th of October, I said my trade of the year was to buy one-year Treasury bills, which were then yielding over 23%, and borrow in dollars, and that trade has done rather well. Interbank rate is finally below 10%. That's what's putting a little bit of sell-side pressure onto the ship. We are seeing about 1 million customers come into the market every year, and we're putting a lot more emphasis on regional initiatives. This is Bob Collymore. That million number is really the demographic dividend in action. Nairobi all share down 14.41% year to date, but big bounce 1.85% yesterday. NSE 20 bounced just under 1% yesterday as well. The IMF's resident representative Armando Morales was quoted by the wires as saying that Kenya's debt is sustainable and classified it as at a low risk of distress. He did advocate for budget cuts according to the report filed by Capital. Bob Collymore was more forthright on the matter and said the country is not dying. Safaricom outstandingly muscular first half earnings was the catalyst for a broader rebound to take shape around Safaricom's 4.54% ramp higher. Nairobi all share had one of its biggest single session gains of the year, up 1.84%. Of course, the headline event was those earnings. Safaricom reported a 22.54% increase in first half revenue. That's a big signal. Voice expanded 3.48%, double the rate of expansion in the previous year. M-Pesa revenue clocked 19.35 billion plus 24.12. Data revenue surged 40.92%, and that surge had to hurdle a 40% price decline in the cost of data, so that was strong as well. They upgraded full-year guidance. Results beat the consensus of earnings estimates by a meaningful margin, in my view. That's why we got such a strong response back up to the 15 level. And it was those sparkling set of earnings which was the catalyst for a wider rally to develop. Equity Group unchanged at 41.75. Big ticket trade went through 27.623 million. KCB up 1.88%. Making it up 4.51% over 2 sessions. It's up again today. Cooperative Bank announced a 37% growth in net profit for the 9 months to September, which is a bullish outlier on the continuum of 9-month earnings releases that we've seen of late. CFC Stanbic rallied 6.172, Barclays plus 1.2%. EABL was heavily traded to close unchanged. KPLC, which had fallen 13.33% over 3 sessions, rebounded 4.23% yesterday. Ahead of your weekend, I wish you a great one and look forward to picking this discussion up on Monday.